How's everyone doing? Yeah?
On the ODP, I taught myself a lot harder. I put in a print statement to figure out why my code wasn't doing what it was doing, or what it was supposed to be doing. So I got it working pretty quickly, just using the print statement and seeing what it was doing and what I needed to change. And I was so excited I got it working, I went to assess it, and it kept saying 0. And I was like, what the heck? Well, I didn't pull the print statement out.
That would do it.
As soon as I pulled it out, then I was fascinated.
The real bummer of that is sometimes you end up making changes to a piece of code that works, and you end up breaking it like in all kinds of horrible ways. And then when you figure that out, you can't figure out how to go back.
It's funny, I did that on the stick program, and I couldn't get it to work. I was like, what the heck, what's going on? On one of my conditionals, I used an and instead of an or, which is an or. And I ended up rewriting it like 6 times, and I couldn't get it figured out. And finally I saw that, I go, are you kidding me? As soon as I switched it, it worked perfect.
Yeah, that's why we do it, right? Because it feels good when we stop. Well, cool. Okay. So any questions on that ODP?
I do have a quick question. So what's the difference between r star star and r star? Because I noticed that one is car star. And car star star.
Yeah.
When you do star, it's a pointer, so you're making an array of characters, and then when you do another star, you're making an array of strings. Well, of whatever you're putting in it, but
exactly.
It's an array of arrays.
Okay, gotcha.
And one way to think of it is this is an array of integers. This is an array of characters. This is an array of character stars. And a character star is a string. So this is really an array of strings. And since spaces don't matter, it's like that.
So that can be just any number of different phrases stored in an array. Okay.
So if we say car star star s array for string array, then we could do something like, string array bracket 0 equals hello. String array bracket 1 equals hi. And so on. Now to make that work, we need to do some other things. We need to get into some malloc statements and stuff. But theoretically, right, this would be what our array might look like.
I have a question about functions. When you're setting them up, you're putting down what return type they're going to be. So like you put in like int, string, star. So does it have to expect that specific return type? I mean, like, could you have your function return multiple arguments back to main?
Until we talk about structures, no. You return basically one thing, and it's got to be the right type of thing. So let's see.
We dealt a little bit with structures before. That's basically creating pointers to different types of data in a single call kind of thing.
Right, yeah, it's kind of like a super variable. So let's make a function which doesn't take any arguments, but it just returns an integer to us. And so there's answer, we'll call it, we'll save the result in I and we'll print it out. So if I did this, it does what you kind of expect. If answer function returns a 5, and so when I set I equal to answer, I get set equal to 5. If I return a 5 point, which is a floating point number, that still works. Let's see what it'll do in this case. Yeah, I wish that wasn't working, because that just killed my beautiful explanation. So it's
I understand the types.
Yeah.
I just was going about like multiple return values or something.
Yeah, so if I do something blatant like that, right, then I will certainly get errors. All right, go ahead and send me an attendance ping. Let me know you're here. So ODP 413. So this was our function to count the occurrences of a letter E in a string, and here's one way to do this, right? So I included string because I was going to use string length. This is where I begin writing my function. So it returns an integer. It takes a char star, which is a string, and we're not going to declare this variable argument to be, like a character bracket 120 or something. When something is calling our function, it will pass a string to us. And this is presumably a string that's already been declared in a main program and hopefully given a value, right? So it actually points to some characters. And so here all we need to say is whatever this argument is, it's pointing to a character. In other words, it's an array of characters. So there's our running.
Question.
Yeah.
On the headers, you have string.h.
Mm-hmm.
In the main program you tested, you also have to have string.h, or because it's in here, you don't have to worry about it?
If your file contains calls to things like string length, then you need to have an include in the top of that file. But if you're calling a function that uses string length, no, you don't need to include string.h. But in your main program, you would include a prototype for this. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Well, just because you're already declaring it here in the function and you're only using it in the function,
Right.
you only have to declare it. Okay.
Exactly, yeah. And the only thing main needs to know is, hey, when I call county, I should pass a pointer to a character or get back an int. And it really doesn't care like what goes on inside that function. So yeah, that wouldn't have to be in main. Similarly, in my main program, if I'm going to do some print statements, I would need to have standard io.h. But inside this function, I don't need standard io.h because I don't do any prints or fgets or anything like that. So C is my running.
Conditionals are those are built into C, the conditional. They're not part of any function.
Things like if statements.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the C language itself. So, and the language is relatively small, but ifs, fors, whiles, return, assignment statements, declaration of variables, those are all part of the language itself. Mostly what we're getting from here is prototypes for functions. So if you look at string.h, there's a string length function, and it takes a char pointer and it returns something called a size t, which is basically like an int in the end. And it's declared extern here because this is not going to include the definition of string length. It's going to be written somewhere else. Having duplicate includes usually is harmless. It doesn't actually pull in the code twice usually if it's a well-written include file. And what happens is in the beginning of an include file, there's an if statement which says if underscore string underscore h is not defined, go ahead and define it. And then all of this is inside an if statement in the include file. And so basically the first time you include string.h, this string will not be defined. So it will execute all of this, which basically includes all of these 500 lines in your file. But it also defines this macro variable called string underscore h. If you happen to include string.h again in the file, it will say if not defined. Well, this is defined, so it will basically skip all of this. And this if not defined goes all the way from the beginning to the end. So those are like guards you can put on include files to stop them from being included once. Now, if I did include all of these lines more than once, I wouldn't be able to compile. I would get errors saying, for example, string fry has been defined twice. So we put these include guards in there. Alright, so iterating over a string. If you have a string like hello, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters in it, string length will return a 5. And because we start from 0, that means the highest index that represents a letter in our string is 4. So the usual way to iterate through the characters of a string is to go from 0 to 1 less than the string length. So if we do I less than string length, that basically goes to string length minus 1. If your string happened to be empty, this would say for I equals 0, I less than 0, and that condition is immediately false, so your loop would never iterate. And that's the behavior you want for an empty string usually. So this is just running I through each of the character positions, and for each value of I, this checks to see if element I of the string, so it's an array, arg bracket I is the ith element, is equal to, and we want to compare it to a character, because the elements in this arg array are characters. So we use a single quote E, and that says, basically use the ASCII code of that character. And if it matches, then we increment our counter, and at the end we return the counter. Alright, so that's one way to have done ODP 413. I do not have an ODP for today. I will post one tomorrow morning, which will get us into some more command line processing from C. But no ODP for today. Alright, so any questions about that? All right. Somebody asked in the previous section, so I'll go ahead and mention it here because it's a useful thing to have. So you may have noticed when I log into the Linux server, I just say SSH $Linux. $Linux is just a shortcut for Nick at linuxengrcs.com. But when I do this, I don't need to type in a password. It logs me in automatically. And that's an easy thing to set up on Unix. So in your machine that you want to log into, you have a directory called .ssh. So I can go into .ssh. And this is where you made your public-private key pair that you use for Git. There's also a file that you can create called authorized keys. And basically in that file, I have a public key from my laptop. So on my laptop itself, which is running Linux, I made an SSH key pair, public and private. And if I take the public key from there and I paste it into this file called authorized keys, when I try to log in, it will log me in without having to type a password. It'll basically use this, and it will ask the laptop, do you have a private key that goes with this? And if I am who I say I am, then my private key should be on my laptop under .ssh, and it can authenticate that that's the private key that goes with this, and it'll go ahead and log me in. And it's not a huge deal, but the more you can spend your time doing what you're trying to do, the more efficient you're going to be, and the more fun you're going to have. And if you're trying to finish PA3, typing in passwords is not really part of that. Remembering and typing, my name at linux.engrcs.com, enter, is not really part of that, right? You want to get in there, you want to start writing code, you want to find your bugs, you want to fix them, you want to test them, you want to move on to the next feature, right? That's your gig as a programmer. And so anything you can do along the way to kind of like smooth that process out, to streamline it, is going to help you. It's going to make you more efficient. It's going to let you kind of stay in the mindset of whatever it is you're trying to do. And that's sort of the mentality of what I want to talk about this morning, which is I want to talk about VI, and offer some ideas on how to use VI maybe more efficiently than you may have been using it so far. And my reason for doing this is not that VI is the ultimate editor, and not that you're going to be tested on VI, because you're not. But there's a general mindset that I want to encourage, and I think of this as kind of a Linux mindset, but it's not specific to Linux. But it's this idea of, you're a programmer, you write code, you come up with algorithms, you implement algorithms, you test your code, you find bugs and you fix them, you document your code, right? These are the things you do. Anything that is outside of that is a distraction. It's an impediment to doing what you're trying to do. And so the nice thing about working in Linux is you can customize your Linux environment to your liking, right? I like working with, a black background with green text. And I like my text to be nice and large like this, right? Some people like, a white background with black text, and they like their text to be like this size because they have really good eyes and they can fit a lot on their screen, right? It's up to you, right? Your choice of editor is up to you, but whatever editor you use, it should ideally be an editor that you can customize to do the things that you want to do. So for example, some people like having line numbers on their code, and so if your editor has the option of turning on or turning off line numbers, right, that's helpful. Some people like color coding their code. I don't know how to turn syntax on. Yeah, oh, okay, I disabled it. But you can turn on color coding for keywords and things like that. And with VI and most other editors, right, you can put these configuration options in a file where they'll be permanent for you. So you don't have to say, set number or set no number every time that you go into VI. If you always work in a particular directory, you can set up your login to log you in and start in that directory. If you always work in the CSE224 directory, you can put something at the end of your bash RC which says go into this directory. And then you don't have to say cd space CSE224 every time that you log in. And it's again, not that it takes you so long to say cd space CSE224, but if you don't have to think about it, if you don't have to do it, that lets you kind of, focus your mind on what it is you are trying to do. So I want to talk a little about VI. And VI is one of many editors you can use, but it's an editor that's been around for decades. I started using VI in the 70s, And so, you know, over 40 years ago, and the things that I learned to do on VI 40 some years ago still work today. They've never changed, they've never gone away. Now VI has changed. VI, you know, led to VIM, which is an improved version of VI, and there's different versions of Vim. There's a light version, and there's a full version, and there's all kinds of additional features. But the things that I learned, you know, in the 70s for working on in VI still work today, right? I never had to go back and relearn anything to be able to edit my files, and that's a really good thing to be in, because if you use a tool for 40 years, you're going to be really good with that tool, right? Doesn't matter what the tool is. If you use, you know, scissors on a daily basis, you cut fabric and stuff, right? You get really good with scissors. You walk into a fabric store and you watch someone cut fabric, and it's amazing. They're just using a pair of scissors to cut fabric, but wow, you can tell that, like, this person has been doing this, and there's a difference, you know. You get in a taxi cab with someone who drives for a living and has been driving for a living for 20 years. It's a very different experience from, you know, going with your friend to McDonald's or something. So you want a tool set that works for you, and you want to be able to stick with it. And if it doesn't work for you, if you find something that works better, you know, you change. You find a new tool. But if the person or company that makes the tools you're using changes them every year, and you have to learn new menu options, and things go into different places, or you move from one machine to another and it looks totally different, or it has a different version of it, and so on, right? That just costs you productivity. It costs you time, it costs you mental energy. So I'm going to talk about VI, and the commands I'm going to give you. I'll post something on Canvas later today with a synopsis of some of these commands. These are not like the best commands in all of VI, right? These are just the commands that I tend to use most of the time. And my suggestion in going through this is, you know, take notes or go back. There's a video posted on the YouTube channel for this course that goes through all of this. It's like a 20-minute video, I think, and it's tagged and everything. But, you know, take some notes, but mostly just kind of like be aware of some of the things you can do in this editor. And then if somewhere down the road, you know, you're deleting a line character by character for the 20th time someday, you might think, you know, way back in October, I remember a lecture where there was a way to delete a line with just 2 keystrokes. What was that, right? Go back to your notes, go back to the video, figure out what that was.
Right?
Say again?
DD.
Yeah, DD. And use a DD command, and you know, embrace the feeling you get from that. And if it feels good, next time you want to delete a line, you start backspacing, you're like, oh, wait a minute, escape DD. Oh, yeah, that's good. If it's a good command that works for you, you'll use it more, you'll start to remember it more, and it'll become part of your tool set. If it's a command that you don't use, you won't remember it, well, that's good. You can store other things in that part of your brain. So just kind of be aware of some of the things that we can do in VI, and be open to, you know, exploring them, trying them out, seeing if they work for you or not. So I'm just gonna poke around on a junk file that I have. It's just my bash RC. So we know how to get into VI. We say VI space test, and if test already exists, it brings us in and lets us start making changes to this file. If the file doesn't exist, it, you know, creates a new file. So I'm just going to work on a file that already exists here. And the first thing I want to be clear about is there's 2 modes in which VI operates. There's insert mode and there's command mode. And insert mode is where you're inserting new things into your file. And command mode is where you're telling VI to do things to your file. And most of the time, I see students working in insert mode, meaning they say VI a file, and then as soon as they get into the file, they hit an I to go into insert mode. And now they start typing, and whatever they type becomes part of their file. And if they want to move down, they use arrow keys. If they want to get rid of something, they backspace, and so on and so forth. And in reality, VI is much more powerful if you spend most of your time in command mode. And you restrict insert mode to when you're trying to insert something in the file. So what can you do if you're in command mode in VI? Well, for one thing, you can move around, right? So you can use the arrow keys in insert mode to move around, but you can also move around in VI by using H, J, K, and L. Okay, so they're all right next to each other on the keyboard. They're in the middle of the keyboard, so you don't have to reach very far to get to your keys. And moving around is probably the main thing you're going to do. The thing you're going to do most of the time is move from one spot in your file to another. So J moves you down, K moves you up, L goes to the right, H goes to the left. If you play Rogue, this is how you move around the dungeons also. So it's useful for that too. Is it a big deal to move your hand to your keypad where your arrow keys are? Well, probably not, but it takes a little bit of time. And HJKL, they're right there in the middle of the keyboard. So that's kind of nice. Alright, so we can move around, big deal, right? We can also move around a word at a time. So if I hit W, it will jump to the beginning of the next word. Words are things that are basically separated by punctuation or spaces. So I'm sitting right here in the middle of history. If I hit W, it jumps to the beginning of length. See hist size and hist size file in bash. JKL semicolon. I think you can remap them. So I think you could remap H to be a back, J to be a back, and so on and so forth. Alright, so W will let me move forward one word at a time, and if I just keep hitting W, it keeps moving through. And this is nice sometimes, you know, if I'm on this line and I want to change hist file size to something else, I can just W until I get over there. I can do B to go backwards a whole word, so that brings me back. And I can do an E to go to the end of a word. So that moves me a word at a time, but it takes me to the end of the word instead of taking me to the beginning. And then I can also put numbers in front of these, and most commands in VI you can put numbers in front of. So if I wanted to go forward 6 words on this line, I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I could also just type a 6 and a W, and it does W 6 times. So I'm on line 22. If I want to go down 18 lines, I could do a J 18 times, but I can also just say 18J, and now I'm at line 40. So you can go forward, backward, left, right, HJKL, and you put numbers in front of them. You can also go forward by a word with W. You can go forward by a word with E that automatically leaves you at the end of the word, and you can go backwards with a B. So those are quicker ways to move around. If you want to move even more quickly, you can do Control D to go down half a page. So set a fancy prompt non-color unless we want color. If I hit Control D, that line moves up to here. Right, I just moved down half a page. If I do a Control U, I go up half a page. So this is a quick way to move through your file. And I can see, you know, it's like a rapid scroll. And, you know, if you've got auto repeat, it'll get you from one end of the file to the other really quickly. And you can also put a number in front of those. If I want to go down 5 pages, I can say 5 Control D, and suddenly I'm at oh, nope, that doesn't work. Never mind. Forget that. Doesn't work with D. I can change how far Control D goes.
That just changed it so that your Control D and Control U is now pages up or down that many lines.
Right, right. So that changes the size of going forward and back. That's Control D to move down, and Control U to go up. So D goes down, U goes up. And it's about half a page at a time, so 12 lines. Vim Adventures to help you practice using the commands. Sounds great. Alright, also if you're on a line, you can get to the end of a line by hitting a $sign. So $sign takes me to the end of a line. If I wanted to do something with that word will, I can now do a B, and I'm right at the beginning of that last word. If you want to go to the beginning of a line, you can hit a 0, and that takes you to the start. So you can jump to the end of a line, so you don't have to word, or worse, you know, space all the way over. Just hit a $sign. Now, obviously, these things don't work if you're in insert mode. If you're in insert mode and you start typing W or $sign or B or Control D, right, you're just typing input into your file. So you got to be in command mode. And command mode, right, is anytime you're not in insert mode. Insert mode, usually you do an I to go into it, you hit an escape to come out and go back into command mode. But you start in command mode, and that works. So the home and end keys will also work, at least on my keyboard, and some other people's, they seem to work. So end takes me to the end, and home takes me to the beginning. You can also use a caret to go to the first non-space character on a line. So if you're heavily indented, right, and you go to the beginning, you might have to like space all the way over or do a word. Well, if I just hit a caret, it takes me to that first non-blank character. So sometimes that's useful. And you can also, you know, move down a line by hitting enter, which also moves you to the beginning of the line. So that's always an option. And, you know, you can put numbers in all of these. I can do a 10 and an enter, and it moves me down 10 lines. All right, deleting. So most of the time when people are deleting in VI, they're using backspace. They go into insert mode, they go to the end of the line, they backspace to get rid of it. And that can take a while. So if I want to get rid of a line, all I have to do is hit DD, and that deletes the line. If I want to delete 3 lines, for example, these 3 lines with double comments in the beginning, I can say 3 DD, and all 3 lines get deleted. If I want to delete a single character, I can hit an X. And so if I wanted to uncomment all of these, I can hit an Enter X, Enter X, Enter X. If I want to delete multiple characters, I could do, if I want to delete 6 characters, I could do a 6X. And that'll get rid of the next 6 characters. And when you delete something, it actually goes into like a mini little clipboard. It's called a paste buffer. And the last thing that you delete is available to be pasted or put somewhere else. So for example, maybe I want to move this line somewhere. I could say DD to delete it. I'm using K to go up here, and now if I just type the letter P, it puts that line that I deleted right here. And so if I've got these 4 lines in the beginning that I want to move to the end of my file, I could say 4DD, go to the end of my file, do a P, and now they pop up at the bottom of my file. You can also copy things without deleting. You can use the yank command. So if I wanted to take these 5 lines and copy them somewhere else, I could do a 5 and an uppercase Y, and it tells me 5 lines yanked. And then if I go up here and I hit a P, it pastes those right there. You can also undo your last command with a U, and maybe I wanted to paste them up here, so I can do that now. Or I could go up here, and I can paste them multiple times. I could like just keep hitting P and make a bunch of copies of this.
What'd you say the U was?
U will do an undo. It'll undo the last command you did, but it generally only undoes 1 command.
When I'm hitting 5Y to yank 5, it says 5 lines yanked at the bottom.
Good.
but then I hit P and it only puts in the first line.
You did a
It says
lower.
5 more lines still.
You did a lowercase p.
I'm gonna see real quick. I mean, I've tried both. Yeah, it just is putting in CD. Or it just is putting in the first line. Sorry, you can't see what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's okay. Are you putting it at the bottom of your file or the bottom of your screen?
No.
That's strange. So if I do 2y, it says
It worked right there. I think maybe I was doing lowercase y with
okay.
or something.
Yeah, and yank and paste can be a little weird. They can trip people up. So don't start trying to use them on like the final version of your code 20 minutes before the assignment's due. But they're pretty harmless. And most of the time, I just use DD. If I wanted to copy these lines somewhere, I'll just do 2DD and then a U to undo, and then go somewhere else and just a P for paste. And someone's suggesting 5YY to copy, and then P to paste below, Shift P to paste above, and V and Shift V to select. Yeah, so that works too. So there's lots of ways to do all these things. And again, you know, I'm not claiming my way is the best, and it's certainly not the only. It's just the way that I've learned. And as long as you find a way to do the things that you need to do that makes sense to you, you're good, right? All right. So the other thing with moving around is I can do a Control G and see where I am in the file. So I'm at line 423 out of 450. I'm 94% of the way through my file. And if I don't happen to be, you know, on the left, it'll tell me I'm in column 14, for example. And you know, when you compile your code, sometimes it says, you know, missing semicolon at line 67, right? So when you're in VI, you can type a 67 in an uppercase G, and it'll jump to line 67. So you can go immediately to any line number that you want. If I do 400G, there's line 400 of my file. If you want to go to the first line, that's always line 1, so 1G takes me to the beginning of my file. And if I want to go to the last line, just do a G with no number. That means go to the last line of the file. So Shift G moves you around, Control G tells you where you are. Alright, so how do you get out of VI? If you're looking at a file and you're not intending to edit it, don't do a WQ, don't do an X, just do :Q. Right? If you're not trying to change the file, don't ask VI to write any changes to the disk, because you're kind of inviting disaster. If my goal here was not to edit my file, but just to look at it inside VI and I'm done looking at it, do a :Q. And if you do that and you accidentally made changes, it will say, hey, you've got changes that you haven't written. Now, if I don't want to make those changes permanent and I had said WQ, those changes are permanent now. So this is a safety. This is telling me, hey, you've got some changes. Do you really want to quit? If you really want to quit, if you don't want to change your file, that's when you can say Q!. And that will quit even though you had changes you didn't write. Same thing if you have a file that's read-only and you try to write, it'll say, hey, it's a read-only file. If you have permission to change the permission bits on this file, you can force the write to happen by saying :W!. Okay, it won't let me do that because I set the permissions for read-only access. But, and so now if I try to quit, it'll say, hey, you can't quit because you haven't saved your changes, but you can't save your changes because it's read-only. That's another time, just use Q!. But if I had stuff in here that I wanted to save, I could write that I haven't already created, and then I could quit. And now I've got this new file too, that's got my changes to it. Alright, so you can save your changes with :W, you can quit with Q, you can do both at the same time with :WQ. Alright, another good command to know is period. Period repeats your last command. So let's say I just deleted this line. If I just hit a period, that'll repeat my last command, that'll delete this line. And every time I hit a period, it deletes another line. So if I want to take out a big chunk of my file, say down to here, I can just keep hitting a period. And it's a little easier than hitting DD, DD, DD. Alright, I can also delete a word by saying DW. And again, if I hit a period, it'll repeat that, so I can delete individual words on this line by just hitting a period. Or I could say, 5 DW to delete 5 words from this point forward. Or you can delete from your current point to the end of the line with a Shift D, and that takes out everything from that point on. Let's see, you can join lines with a Shift J. So if I wanted to join this line with the following line, I can just hit a Shift J, and those two lines are now together. And I could hit X twice to take out that number sign, and now I've got, a nice long comment. Alright, let's talk about the swap file. So you're doing this, and let me see if I can make this happen. Let's say you
accidentally hit Control Z instead of.
So yeah, let's do Control Z first. So if you hit Control Z, that stops your VI session, but it doesn't close it out. It doesn't exit. You're still sitting in there, and if you try to VI test again, you get this friendly message with a red attention saying, hey, there's a test.swap file, right? So what do you do with this? So :Q, get out of there, right? And first thing I recommend to do is make a copy of your current version of your file. So, copy test to test save. Okay, I'm going to do that before I do anything else, because there's options for trying to recover changes that you might have lost and so on. But before you do anything, make a copy of your file. Put it somewhere else, test save or something, and then you can start exploring how to get rid of that swap file. Alright, so VI test. And it's basically telling you that somebody was in the middle of editing this file and hasn't exited. Now, chances are that's you. Chances are you were editing it and you Control Z'd, or you closed the window by hitting X, or your connection to the server went away, or your laptop rebooted or something, right? But if somebody else was editing this file and you started trying to edit it, that's a recipe for disaster, because you'll end up overwriting each other's changes. So this is another safety measure. So if you get this message, go ahead into VI, just hit enter, eyeball this, make sure it looks good. If it's missing, a whole bunch of changes, what can you do? You can say VI test, and it will tell you if an edit session crashed, you can try to recover by saying VIM-R test. And sometimes that will get back changes that you made but hadn't saved yet. But chances are, if you look at your file is going to be intact. This is what you wanted your file to look like. Okay, so all you want to do is make that message go away. So do :Q. Well, when you see that message, it tells you what the file is, .test.swap. So do an ls-a, there's the swap file. that's the file that's causing that message to appear. Assuming you don't want to try to recover changes that you hadn't saved, all you got to do is delete that file. So just remove .test.swap, and now when you VI test, it should just behave itself. If you do this more than once, right, you'll get a .swap, a .swo, a .swoon, right? You get a swap file for each one of these. If you start seeing this, there's a good chance that what you're doing is you're using Control-Z to get out of VI. And we don't want to use Control-Z. Control-Z says, get me out of this command, but don't finish the command. Leave it kind of hanging out in the background. And that's exactly what causes these swap files. So I can remove .test, .sw, I'll just do question mark. And now those are all gone. And I can do my VI again. All right, any other miscellaneous I want to tell you here? All right, so that's getting into VI, getting out of VI, moving around, deleting, and a few miscellaneous things, yank and put, and joining lines and so on. So we'll continue this tomorrow, and what I want to talk about to wrap this up tomorrow is inserting text, right? So we do want to insert things. But we only want to go into insert mode when we're planning to insert stuff. But when we decide it's time to do an insert, there's a lot of ways we can do it, right? For example, if I wanted to change the word interactively to something, right? If you're in insert mode, you space over or you arrow over to this position, and then you backspace to delete it, and then you type the new one. Well, I can just type CW, which says change word. And it shows me where the end of the word is, and I can type a new word, hit escape, and I just change that word from interactively to hello. And if I want to do that somewhere else, I can just hit a dot, and it does the same command, changes that word to hello. And I can start changing my whole file to hellos. So there's a whole lot of ways we can insert text beyond just going into insert mode with an I and typing. We can change words, we can add things to the end of words, we can open an entire new line and start typing there. We can open a new line above where we are and start typing there, and so on and so forth. So we'll look at a bunch of different ways to go into insert mode and insert text. And then we'll talk about searching, and there's powerful search features in VI. And then we'll talk a little about the VI command line, which is what happens when you hit a colon. And normally we do X or W or WQ, but there's a lot of things we can do in here. A lot of options we can set, and a lot of commands we can execute to modify our file. And in some ways, this is the most powerful part of VI, at least to me. This is where we can start using the power of a command line to do things that are more complex than what we could do with just hitting a single key or two keys like DD or X. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, and that will probably wrap up our discussion of VI. And then I want to talk about GDB next, which is the GNU debugger, and that's going to be a really useful tool as we continue developing C programs for PA3. That's going to be a really useful way to help us figure out what's going on with our code when it's not working right, and track the execution of it and find where our bugs are. All right, so go ahead and send me an attendance note on the way out, and have a fantastic afternoon, and I will see you all tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Have a good one.